Hello and welcome to our monthly relationship success support hangout. Today we are discussing digital relationships and how technology is in a way replacing human interaction. We have with us tonight Anna from Sweden. Hi Anna.
Hi everyone. Hi Suri.
We've got Carrie and Chris from USA. Hi guys.
Hi. Hi.
Thanks everyone for joining. We're going to be discussing personal experiences relating to creating relationships on the internet, as well as we're going to be touching on the topic of people creating relationships with apps and programs and essentially avatars. So let me start off with sharing my experience that I had with the online world of interactions. Was when I was about 13 or so. I discovered internet chat sites, and I started talking to people there. And I suppose for me at that time, the starting point for doing that was to look for boys, because I was very shy in person, so I didn't have the courage to develop relationship with guys in my life, so I started doing it on the internet. And obviously at such a young age it can be quite risky, because your overzealousness will very often lead you to do things without really considering what consequences may be attached. So for example, a lot of young girls end up talking to adult men and not realizing it, and then when they arrange to meet, they sometimes some very unpleasant things happen, such as the men raping the girls. Other times the girls are lucky enough to kind of turn around and walk off. But that's just one dimension and one way that this can play out. For now, let's have Anna share her personal experiences with us, and then we'll move on to the next and start digging into how and why these things are happening so frequently in our society.
So while you were speaking, I actually remembered, because I grew up right around the time where the internet emerged, and I remember even before the internet, as kids, when we were around 10, 12 years old, we would actually call, there was this kind of hotline thing. There was like a sexual hotline, and where all these grown men would meet and they would look for girls. So you actually had that even before the internet, and we would sort of play with fire and prank call these guys, and there were some instances where it turned sort of dangerous in arranging to meeting. Not we didn't know what we were doing, and then when the internet came, that was the very first thing that I saw it for. I didn't consider emailing, or social media profiles didn't exist. So it was very much about meeting people, and there was all these forums. And I actually created, when I think I was about 15 or 16, I created a relationship with a guy who then turned out to be a grown man in his 30s with a wife and kids, and only much later, as an adult, I realized that he was grooming me, and at that point I don't think you could even send images, but if that would have been now, I can very easily see how it could have gone very wrong. And I thought that we were in this very deep romantic relationship. And was basking in all this attention that I got from men and from this guy. And I remember when it started sort of falling apart, I thought that he was like this perfect man. He would send me these very romantic messages, and he would praise me and how amazing I was, and he knew how old I was. And then I started realizing more and more how this was an adult man, and how his life was completely different from mine, and that this wasn't really gonna go anywhere. So that was a bit of a shock, you know, what I had gotten myself into. And then later on, as an adult, I've also ventured into actual online dating, where you set up a profile and then you set up dates and then you go out and meet people. And fortunately enough, I've not had bad experiences with it, but I have experienced getting to know someone, for example, over a 6-month period, where you write to each other back and forth every day, and it gets, you know, it gets very intense, and you think about them all the time, and you can't wait till they reply, and then when you end up meeting them, it just completely collapses, because you've built up this, you know, this is my soulmate and this is perfect, and in that you just, you know, you type and you write, you know, the perfect things about yourself, and then when you meet in the real flesh, this person is so much more than what they said they were. They're not just that perfect image, and so I've never experienced it going further than that first date, because it was so disappointing.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Anna, for sharing. Chris or Carrie, would one of you like to share your experiences?
Yes. My experience is kind of the other side of Anna's experience. I was the 30-year-old male with the wife and kids, talking to the younger girls online. What it was is that what I didn't think I was getting at home. It all started as just bored one day. You just, well, I'll talk. So you go to the sites where you can't even see what they look like at first or anything like that. So you just start chatting, and then you start to realize that there's a lot of competition for this one girl, because you'll talk to, as it randomly sets you up with somebody to chat to, you'll have gone through 6, 7, 15 guys before you even get to one girl. So you've really got to impress her, keep her interested, and then you can start chatting and seeing where it goes, and then moving from there. That you really have to pour on the charm. You've got to just let the bullshit flow, and it doesn't matter what. It's almost like a competition, because at any minute you could lose them, and then you could spend another hour, 2 hours looking for another one. You know, it's kind of like fishing. So I developed 2 that I would call real solid relationships, and they lasted about 18 months. And one was older, and then the other one was just a couple of years younger than her. But there was that back and forth, and then you all of a sudden started to experience jealousy when she was talking about other boys, and it never felt equal, because you just had to do so much to keep them interested that you just created this fantasy world inside your head that would just never work. And you're, like I said, I'm 30 years old, and talking to 18, 19, 17-year-olds. It's like, why do you think this is ever going to go anywhere or become anything? But I never anticipated it becoming that. You go into it and you're saying, okay, once I get what I want, once I'm satisfied, it's pull the plug, shut it off. It doesn't exist anymore. It's all deleted. Back to physical one.
Thank you for sharing. Carrie, would you like to share your experiences?
hmm After I found out about what was going on with him, I went onto the apps and onto the sites to figure out what it was about. And for me, what I found, you post a picture on there, and it's just immediate flood of messages from men. There's so many men on these sites. You can't even keep up with it. There's so much coming in, and there were times I just had to shut the app down. And there's some people that you make a connection with, and but for me, I don't like having a mental relationship with someone. It's very frustrating for me. I like to be physical, so I couldn't really get into it too much. Um, but it was fun, and it was awesome having all of that attention, especially at that time in my life where I was kind of feeling pretty shitty about myself. So the confidence boost was really nice. I did do some research on it after, and a lot of these men are married and they do have families, and there's families breaking up over this, like crazy amounts. And basically, like what he said, it's just they're not getting what they need or want at home, so they're looking, elsewhere, and it's just easy to they've got their phones, they've got their computers. And, I mean, if they find the right girl, the girl will Skype with them, so it is kind of real, and even on these apps, there's video, like, apps in the apps. So they can have this entire relationship with this person and call them from these apps and all of that. That's what I'm saying, is that it is possible to actually have a relationship digitally. If you're the type of person, that prefers, more of the mind fantasy experience to the physical.
Okay, cool. Thanks for sharing. We have a question here from Reb. Excuse me. And she asks, would you say it's a form of entertainment? Would anyone like to answer Rebecca's question?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. When you're bored, all you have to do is download the app. And if you're, like for me, I've been working online on my computer for a year, and I homeschool Hunter, so I'm home alone. There's no one ever around, so I become isolated. So even when you're lonely and you just want someone to talk to, it's just right there. And you can, send pictures back and forth, and it's fun.
You know what I was also looking at is that all of us have probably grown up with TV, and so we see these perfect relationships. So it's kind of like trying to get into that TV or movie relationship, which is very one-dimensional because it is so scripted. And especially when it comes to sex and love, it's always perfect. You never see people going to the toilet. You never see awkward, or very rarely you don't see awkward, uncomfortable moments. You don't smell body odor and stuff, right? And so it's like we're trying to get into that ideal that we, it's not something that we're consciously aware of when we grow up, but I think that it shapes so much our ideas about what perfect sex and perfect relationships is supposed to be. And this is kind of a way of trying to get that, whether you actually think you can or it's just a form of entertainment. Because you can censor yourself both with images as well as with speaking and writing. You don't have to show all of yourself.
Okay, I have one particular point I'd like to bring into this question of if it's a form of entertainment. I'd say that yes and no, because as everyone has shared, there is a very personal aspect that comes through where, for example, in women, they get a big confidence boost because there are a lot of men looking to find women to talk to, and they will go to extreme lengths to catch and maintain the interest of a woman because they have so much competition. So for females, there is that aspect of you feel good about yourself because you're getting all of this attention and all these nice things are being said about yourself, and you're only sharing about yourself those parts of you that are most attractive, that are most appealing. You're not sharing any of the bad stuff. Just like Anna said about the movies, there's no bits of reality of um, going to the toilet, of body odors, of bad habits, of um, irritating particular quirks that you might have, or difficulties in building relationships or talking to people. That stuff you don't have to show. And then on the other side of the spectrum for men, there is yes, there is the aspect of entertainment, of it's enjoyable to go and do these things, but also there's that personal aspect. They're looking for something. They're looking to fulfill a particular desire. And whatever the desire is for them, it's usually just like for women, that you feel like there's something missing within you, and you're trying to find it through this platform, which could be equated to any other kind of platform that we've created in this world. This is just fulfilling specific kinds of desires for those people who feel they're missing certain parts of themselves or certain parts of experiences. So it is a multi-dimensional thing, but yes, there's definitely that aspect of it being entertaining for people, especially in the beginning, as you're getting into it and it's all exciting and new, and you're meeting all these people. So thank you for your question, Rebecca. Let's move on to starting to look at what's behind why this is such a common, let's call it a common thing for people to be doing these days. Who would like to share on what they see about why we do these things?
I think it was just more, like we said a couple of times, you're not getting it here. You've got to look elsewhere to get it. But what you don't see happening is that a lot of times you're not getting it here because you're not voicing what it is or identifying what it is that you really need in order to get it. You know, with me, it all come out as suppression. I was suppressing any sort of communication towards Carrie or anybody else that so bad that I couldn't even identify what it was that I was suppressing anymore. It was just a straight shot down into your stomach, gone. Not that as you went online and you found these girls, and it's like, okay, this feels pretty good. We're in the butterfly and the rainbow stages. Everything's nice, and then as it progresses, and then you slip back into that the competition to keep that girl or these girls or anything like that, to be the alpha, you find yourself suppressing again because you can't, anything wrong with them, anything bothering you about the situation, you can't bark too loud or they're going to run away, and then you're just left hanging again. So that's what I see it as, is you're looking to get what you don't have, but you still can't even identify what it is you're looking for. So you're feeding off of that. I've always called it the butterflies and rainbows. That's the warm and fuzzies that happen at the beginning of the relationships. That seems to happen whether the relationship is good or bad. There's always that moment of euphoria there. That it's almost like you're feeding off that, and you're just trying to stretch that high out as long as you can until it just snaps. And now you don't know, you can't even identify what you're doing there anymore. It's because you know this isn't going anywhere. This is never going to do anything, and this isn't solving anything. That happy feeling is gone. But that's what I see.
Very well said. And then for me, as a single woman, as to why I was doing it, it was also because if you look at the other option, right, you want to either have sex or have a relationship or just have human connection in some way. And the options that I found myself with was always about going out drinking and partying, which I didn't like. I didn't enjoy that even when I was young. And I always wanted to connect with people on a deeper level. I wanted to really get to know them and speak with them and discuss things, and that I could do through these online. I even found specific online dating sites back when I was in my spiritual phase that was for spiritual people. You even have all these very designed, tailored, you have sites for women looking for farmers who are looking for a wife, and you have all these very specific places. So it's also in a way filling a gap for a dating or mating world that is very complicated, and I think even more for males. But you don't have a lot of options in our part of the world. You have to basically go out and party, and also the people that you meet through that, for me being a female wanting a relationship, was mostly guys that just wanted to get laid. And so this was a way that I could actually try at least to find a real relationship, a real connection. But unfortunately, it didn't really work that way either. But it was actually better, because there was always the premise of getting to know one another, which you don't have when you go to a club or a party.
Yeah, I think that those are very important aspects, Chris and Anna, especially when it comes to that point of creating a fantasy, because that fills in also, it trickles into, Anna, your experience, where you are trying to build connections with people, but because of the way that these platforms work, the obligation to be honest kind of isn't there. So even when you are busy developing communication with someone, you tend to be rather dishonest. You tend to only show the best of yourself. You tend to only, everything that you write is very meticulously written out, and the word choice is deliberate so that you can present exactly the right kind of picture that you want to present. So that adds on to the whole fantasy experience, and that butterflies, the magical, fuzzy, warm feeling experience, because essentially what you're doing is the person you're speaking to, you're just feeding that within each other, and you're essentially feeding each other's fantasies. So it generates and maintains that warm, fuzzy feeling. Although, Chris, as you said, it doesn't last, even though you're deliberately charging each other up in that way. It's not sustainable. It's gonna at some point run out. That energy is gonna run out, and you're gonna be left kind of sitting there again at the point that you were at when you started, feeling like you don't have a connection with anyone. No one knows you. You don't have intimacy in your life. You can't find what you're looking for, and for many people, you don't know what you're looking for. There's something missing within you, and you're trying to find it by talking to people, by developing relationships. But this brings us to the second perspective, which is that how we are so stunted in investigating ourselves to see, okay, what do I want? What is it that I feel is missing within me? Just like Chris, you mentioned, where you didn't even realize that you weren't communicating, that you'd been suppressing it this whole time in your relationship with Carrie. We are all living in that way, where we're trying to find missing pieces to the puzzle, but we don't know what the puzzle even looks like. So it's like we're reaching around in the dark looking for parts of ourselves, but we're not looking within us to say, okay, what is it that I actually am experiencing? What's going on inside of me? We just keep going out there looking for someone to fulfill us, looking for someone to fix us, looking for something to fill that hole. And then in conjunction with that is the other reality that even if we do know what we want, very often we don't have the communication and relationship development skills to create that with another person. So we end up in a cycle of conflict, or a cycle of just the relationship is going nowhere because we don't know how to build a relationship with someone. We don't know how to get to a point of dropping our personal reactions, dropping our anger, and getting to a point where we can say, okay, I know that you're angry, and I've been angry as well. Let's calm down, relax, let's talk about this, and talk about it openly and honestly so that we can come to a solution. And it'll blow your mind how many people don't know to just reach that point of getting calm and let's just talk through it. And because of that, because everything stays in this emotional state of being angry with each other, or feeling guilty, or feeling frustrated, or resenting each other, everything just compounds and it gets worse and worse and worse, and eventually you're feeling at the end point of your relationship that you don't ever want to see this person again in your life, because you've built up so much emotional crap towards each other. So, my verbal rampage is now over.
But you know what it also is, what I was just looking at when you were talking, is that it's this crazy idea that everything can be built on a feeling. Like all you need is that feeling. You know, that you're talking about, Chris, the butterflies and the rainbows. And if I just hold on to that and nurture it and feel it, that is going to be the foundation of the whole thing, which is insane. You know, how is a feeling ever going to be able to carry an actual real relationship with, you know, with all the things that we face in our life, both, you know, personally as well as in our practical lives? It's really insane. So it all comes down to what you're saying, Cerise. It all comes down to the fact that none of us have learned how to create real relationships and how to communicate when things get rough. It's like everything. And even now we have these guys in Japan that are opting completely out of relationships. You know, they're just giving up. Okay, then I just won't have that in my life. It's quite sad, actually.
Well, you get that butterflies and rainbows. It's like was mentioned. You can't sustain it. It's gonna end no matter what. And to me, what you almost see it as is the energy that's creating the warm and fuzzies. All of a sudden, what replaces that is responsibility. Is it gets all happy, you're in this online fake relationship, and then all of a sudden well, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to handle this? What if this comes up? How are we going to do this? So then all of a sudden you have to start, you're not focusing on the developing and maintaining this relationship, you're almost troubleshooting on how to repair it. So it's like, okay, this isn't warm and fuzzy anymore, this is getting kind of real, because this is stuff I have to do back here in the real world with my wife. I'm doing this online. This isn't feeding what I think I'm looking for. This is getting a little too real. I did this online because I didn't want it real. And now it turns real. So therefore you lose the warm and fuzzies, and then it just starts falling off.
Yeah, and then you have to start over again, you know, with a new woman.
Yeah, it's a drug. It's just like a drug. It's where you've smoked that cigarette down to the butt. You need to throw it away and grab another one and light it up, because it's gone. It can only sustain so long. And even in real physical relationships, I mean, it's very rare to see a couple that has been a couple for a long period of time still in the warm and fuzzy butterfly feeding off stage. I mean, usually it's just all of a sudden, I just know around here, it seems like it just hits this point where it's like, okay, this works, we can maintain this lateral motion, and we'll just stay together, we won't be alone, and we're both going to die sometime, so this works, this is safe.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite interesting how sometimes people will develop relationships where they kind of will settle for each other, even though they, in a way, hate each other, but they'll still stay together just because they don't want to be alone. Though that is a topic for another discussion, so I'm not going to carry on with that point. Um, now, the one point that I do want to touch on, at least for a little while, is what Anna you mentioned about the new phenomenon of men turning to apps as relationships. They will get an app on whatever device they have, and it's an app of a woman, an avatar, who they essentially have a relationship with, and they can, through interacting with this avatar, they can program her essentially to be the perfect fantasy woman that they have been dreaming about, because she will always respond in exactly the way that they want her to. And yes, these are the men who have chosen to opt out of real relationships. They've chosen to not participate in developing relationships. And it is very common at the moment in Japan, which is a very digitalized community, where the men and a lot of women are spending a lot of time on computers. They're not spending a lot of time interacting with other people, so they're not developing communication skills at all, and they're not developing relationships. You'll find that you've got these two ideals. You've got the women who are seeing all these images of the perfect man, and so they will never settle for one of the men who is actually there, who's been sitting in front of the computer playing games for most of their lives. So the woman would never, well, okay, generally speaking, women don't want to be with these men that are available, and the men don't see how they can create connections with the woman, because the women are not interested in them, because the women are looking for their own fantasy. So you've got this kind of cycle going on. The men are feeling more and more crappy about themselves because they feel incapable of developing relationships. So eventually they just turn to this app. And interestingly enough, some of the men are actually marrying this avatar. And it is, the relationship is so real that they are willing to spend the rest of their lives being married to a digital avatar of a woman that is now fulfilling their fantasy of the perfect relationship. And in a way, it's quite sad, because they could do more, they could be better, but they just don't have the skills to, and in a way, the courage to put themselves out there to start developing real relationships. Obviously, this is only certain parts of it. There's much more to it than just what I have spoken so far. But these are some dimensions. Would anyone like to add to this particular phenomenon that we're seeing happening in places like Japan?
Well, one note is that it's not even an avatar of a woman. It's actually a cartoon character. It's like a drawn manga female, and so it's not even, you know, and that's quite typical for the Japanese culture. But what you also have is you have a lot of, like, for instance, Instagram accounts of models and very hot females, where guys are following these accounts, and these women are making tons of money by, it's kind of the same, but it's kind of the best Western version of that, where you are then addicted to the real image, where in Japanese culture you have the drawn image. But what I also find interesting is that with this app relationship, I could imagine that you can keep the rainbows and what do we call it? Flowers?
Butterflies.
butterflies. You can keep the butterflies and rainbows going for much longer, maybe even forever, because it never, it never runs out. And I find that it's quite a statement to say that you're willing to never have physical contact with another person ever again. That it is so unsatisfying and complicated and difficult that this is what you opt for and this is what you satisfies you. I mean, that says a lot about where we're at as a human race when it comes to our relationships. And at a really extreme level, I mean, this could even be a threat to the survival of the human race as a whole, because no children are being produced by this, and the Japanese cultures have a lot of problems with that they're not having kids. Um, so ultimately, it can even be a threat to the culture itself.
Well, I think it's also the Japanese or any of the men that would be doing this. They're kind of taking themselves out of the competition, and they're also, some of them might see it if they've had relationships in the past or have attempted. They're taking themselves out of that fail scenario,
Yeah.
where they can't fail. They don't have to, and also they're sparing themselves what some would see as psychological manipulation that most men are pre-programmed to perceive women as doing, where it's she's messing with my head. She's saying one thing but showing me something else. All of this is going on. That they're just pretty much opting to take themselves out from any sort of real world effort and emotion that needs to be attached, applied, and just worked through to have a physical relationship. All the hard work's done. It's there. Now all you've got to do is sign on and enjoy.
Cool, guys. That's some very interesting perspectives on the state of humanity in this particular context. So, just for the viewers, there are only a few minutes left that we're going to be doing this. So, if you have any questions, please post them sooner rather than later. Otherwise, you can, of course, post your comments or questions on the video afterwards, which will be answered through comments on YouTube. So, guys, let us look at any closing remarks, any closing perspectives, anything that you would like to share in conclusion to everything that we have discussed so far.
Well, one thing that I'd like to share has to do with looking at, if you're finding yourself in a position of being either addicted to or trying to find love or sex through digital relationships. I think it probably often develops into an addiction quite quickly because you get all these amazing feelings. Is to also consider and force yourself to consider the consequences. Not only for yourself and your own life, but also, because I think we seldom stop to consider the consequences for the person on the other side of the screen. We're just looking at what we want and how we're going to get it. And so, for example, I knew a woman once who created this this type of relationship, and communicated with a guy for a very long time, and they were living in different parts of the world, and eventually he picked up his things and moved, and they got married, and the relationship failed within 1 month. And this poor guy found himself, in a completely different country, and he had uprooted his entire life, and was now, had to start all over, because they didn't, they were just following the rainbows and now I forget it again, the butterflies. So I think, it's not like you can't use this as a method of finding a relationship, but I would say that it's very important to not then jump from there and into a physical relationship without first getting to know each other physically as well. And especially if you live far apart, take the time to get to know one another and find out, what is this person's life really like. And then also, you know, be careful to not mess with people. And like you were talking about earlier, Cerise, the point of honesty. You know, if this is something you really want to do, then be honest about who you are. So kind of using it, you know, using it with common sense instead of using it just to get this this feeling and this excitement.
Cool, thanks, Anna. That is some cool support for someone who's facing or experiencing or participating in this particular platform of communication and meeting people. And we've got a comment here from Randy who's asking, is it partly because there's an addiction to this technology, the idea that the technology can solve all of our problems and they're turning to technology to solve their problems too, or the problems with relationships? So yes, as Anna just mentioned, there is, it does create, it does have addictive properties because especially of those warm and fuzzy feelings that you get, and the boost to your, for example, to your self-worth, and I'm just going to go in both contexts of talking to people online as well as the, for example, the Japanese app point. So in terms of meeting people, yes, you get addicted to those warm and fuzzy feelings. You get addicted to just sharing the best of yourself, because that can be a very addictive thing, to just show the best of yourself where you don't have to be honest and show those parts of yourself that you don't like. So yeah, that would cover that point. Then in terms of the Japanese app, I would say that yes, there is a very large potential for it to be an addictive technology, because yes, you don't have to face the problems that you are experiencing with relationships or with people. You can, it's basically, it's like opting out. You don't have to even go there. Now you can create a fantasy world with a fantasy person who is the perfect depiction of everything that you've ever wanted. And I suppose that is the same with developing these relationships with people as well. You can essentially opt out of your real relationships and opt into this particular fantasy relationship where the usual challenges you face and those parts of yourself that you face that you don't like simply are not there. You don't have to go there. Except in those cases, such as Chris mentioned, where you get to some point where reality starts coming up and the relationship starts demanding more from you. So I hope that I have answered your question, Randy. Does anyone have anything else they would like to add to that for Randy? Okay. Okay, so any other closing remarks, anyone? Carrie, Chris, would you like to add anything before we round this up?
What was interesting for me that came up out of all of this is that question of where are we heading? You know, if all of our relationships are becoming mental and not physical, like you said, there's less and less kids being born in Japan. What kind of effect is this going to have on us in the future? Just because of that fear of facing ourselves and the stuff that's coming up with us and not wanting to take a look at it, and that need to try and find it outside of us, you know, instead of like what he was saying, you know, he just didn't, you know what exactly what it is that he wants, you know, finding what it is that you want, not necessarily expecting someone else to give it to you, and finding out how to give it to yourself.
I think those are very good questions, and I mean that's part of what we're doing with Destiny, is to walk a process of learning how to effectively deal with ourselves, to effectively look within ourselves and see what solutions we can create for our own experiences and also in our relationships with people and our relationship with the world as a whole. I'd say one possible good thing is that the decreased population might be a good thing at this stage.
Yeah, and
Less
also,
born is not necessarily a bad thing.
no, and also it's not that I don't think it's the technology that's the problem, because you know what we're doing right here is facilitated by the same technology, and we're here, we're real, we're connecting right now, right, and we're showing who we are. So
Exactly.
it's not you know we don't have to take the technology out of it. We just have to learn how to use it in a common sense and in a supportive way, because it's also bringing a lot of a lot of real connections that weren't there before the internet. It's actually also made global change possible. So it's not just a dystopic image of it. Yeah. And also with these apps, it's just the beginning. So we'll have to come back in like 10 years and see, are these guys still married to these apps, or will they eventually want the real human connection?
Yeah.
We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, no, but that's a very good point. It's not the apps, it's not the platforms that are being used, it's who we are. It's what we have created within ourselves and what we have allowed within ourselves. And this is just a platform, it's just a medium for us to express what we're experiencing and what we're looking for. So absolutely, you can't blame the apps, you can't blame the websites. We are wholly responsible for what we are doing and what we are creating.
And you
So
can't,
guys,
yeah, you can't blame the apps, the websites. You can't blame the technology. And you can't blame the people that created the apps with the technology. They saw a niche market. They saw a way to make some money. They exploited it. They pushed it. And probably in their mind, they're thinking, we just made a bunch of men very happy. They're going to lead happy, productive lives. And if you are the type of person that doesn't need the physical aspects of the relationship, only the mental, then you don't plan on having kids, you don't plan on any of that. I can see where it would be an easy sell. Here's this app, this is what you can do with it, and this is what it's going to save you, and go for it.
yep, absolutely. Okay, guys, any last comments? No? All right. Thank you so much for being here. This is a really cool discussion. I think we've opened up some very interesting points. Thanks everyone for watching. If you have any particular requests for relationship success support hangout topics, or if you'd like to participate, please leave a comment or send an email, and we will see if we can facilitate you. So, everyone, have a good evening and a good day, and we will see you next month, the first week of April, for the next hangout. I see here's a comment from Jean. Thanks for watching, and good night, good day, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.